A detached stone house with Ben Avon sitting square in the kitchen window. £30,000. House
11
on a
months
lane
on the
above
market,
Machynlleth,
no offers.
slate-roofed,
Here are
with its own
12
gate
more.
just like it. House 1, Tomintoul, Cairngorms, Scotland, £30,000. Tomintoul sits high on the moor at the northern edge of the Cairngorms, and this is a small detached granite cottage on the southern lane out of the village, standing entirely on its own with a low wall around it and nothing built against either side. 2 bedrooms upstairs, both under sloping ceilings, the kind of rooms where you learn quickly which side of the bed you can stand up on. There is a 3rd room downstairs that the last owner used as a winter sitting room, simply because it holds heat better than the rest of the house and needs less coal to feel civilized. The walls are close to 2 feet thick. The windows are deep set, with sills wide enough to hold a row of plants and a pair of binoculars. And the frames were replaced at some point with plain plastic ones that do the job without pretending to be original. Outside there is a garden of roughly 400 square feet at the back, mostly rough grass with a raised bed at one end that somebody built out of scaffolding boards and gave up on. A stone shed with a slate roof leans against the boundary wall, dry inside, with a hook on the beam that has clearly held something heavy for a long time. There is space beside the house for 2 cars, if you do not mind reversing, and a gate that opens straight onto the track up onto the moor. The mountain view comes from the kitchen, and it is the reason anyone looks at this house twice. The window faces southwest across open ground, and the high eastern Cairngorms fill the frame, with Ben Avon on the horizon on clear days, its granite tors visible as small irregular teeth on the skyline. Late afternoon in autumn is when the house earns its price. The low sun catches the heather, the hills turn a color somewhere between rust and violet. The light lasts about 25 minutes, and the whole thing happens while you are standing at the sink with your hands in water. Tomintoul is not an accident of a village. It was laid out in 1775 by the 4th Duke of Gordon as a planned settlement, a single long street with building plots running off it, deliberately established high on the moor at a time when almost nobody chose to build high on the moor. Travelers who passed through in the following decades wrote about it with a kind of bafflement, a straight, orderly street sitting in the middle of empty upland. It remains one of the highest villages in the Highlands, and the logic of the plan is still perfectly legible on the ground. Everything is intentional, everything is in a line, and this cottage sits at the tail end of that line, where the village simply stops and the moor takes over. Inverness is a straightforward run north on the main road, close to 2 hours in winter and noticeably less in summer. Aberdeen is further but reachable as a day trip. The nearest shop is in the village itself, 4 minutes on foot, and the nearest hospital is a serious drive, which is the kind of detail that matters more the longer you live somewhere like this. £30,000, that is the whole house. House 2, Blaenau Ffestiniog, Eryri, Wales, £40,000. Blaenau Ffestiniog is a town built out of slate and surrounded by mountains of slate waste, which explains a great deal about what houses here cost. This one is detached, which is genuinely rare in a town of tight terraces, sitting alone on a slope above the main road, with tips rising behind it and its own 4 walls exposed on every side. 3 bedrooms, 2 of them decent with room for a wardrobe and a chair, and 1 narrow enough that it works better as an office or a place to put a sewing machine. Downstairs there is a living room with a slate fireplace and a kitchen at the back that gets very little direct sun, but stays surprisingly warm, because the ground rises behind it and shelters the wall. There is a small enclosed garden at the front, walled in dry stone with a slate flag path and 2 shrubs that have survived every winter thrown at them. Below the house, cut into the hillside, there is a single garage with a corrugated roof that will need attention within 5 years and a concrete floor that stays dry. Everything about the construction assumes rain. The window ledges throw water clear of the wall, the doorways are recessed, and the roof pitch is steep enough that snow does not sit. The view is from the upstairs landing window and the back bedroom, and it is the Moelwyn Range, grey and layered, with Newtonmore closer and darker to the south. The best time is a morning after heavy rain, when cloud sits halfway down the slopes and moves constantly, so the mountains appear and disappear in sections, while you stand there with a mug in your hand. On genuinely clear days, you can pick out individual quarry terraces cut into the far hillside, faint horizontal lines that look almost geological until you realize they were made by men with hand tools. The history here is real, and it is enormous. Blaenau Ffestiniog roofed a large part of the Victorian world. Slate from these quarries went to Hamburg, to Australia, to the roofs of terraced streets in every industrial British city. The Ffestiniog Railway opened in 1836 specifically to carry that slate down to the harbour at Porthmadog. Worked at first by gravity on the downhill run and horses on the way back up, which is one of the more elegant engineering solutions of the century. The quarries above the town employed thousands of men who worked underground in chambers, lit by candles, paid by the amount of finished slate they produced rather than the hours they gave. And the tips you can see from this house are not natural hills at all. They are waste rock, stacked by hand over generations, and they now dominate the skyline more completely than anything nature put there. Bangor is under an hour by road, Llandudno a little more, and the town has its own station on the Conwy Valley line, which is one of the more spectacular rail journeys in Britain and costs almost nothing, £40,000, and the mountains are free. House 3, Cleator Moor, Western Lake District Fringe, England, £46,000. This is a detached red sandstone house on the edge of Cleator Moor, standing in its own plot with a gravel drive and a hedge that has not been cut in 2 seasons. 4 bedrooms, which is unusual at this price, though the 4th is small and the bathroom is downstairs. An arrangement that will either bother you within a week or never bother you at all. The sandstone is the local sort, deep red and slightly soft, and the corners of the building have weathered into gentle curves that no modern brick will ever manage. The garden runs to about 600 square feet, part lawn and part concrete, with an outhouse at the side currently full of paint tins and a bicycle frame. At the front there is a wide bay window that lets in considerably more light than the room actually needs, and a stone step worn into a shallow dip by 130 years of feet. Inside, the ceilings are higher than you expect, the doors are heavy, and the staircase has a turned newel post that somebody once painted white and somebody else began stripping back. The mountain view comes from the front bedroom and the upstairs bathroom, looking east across fields toward Dent, and beyond it the western Lakeland Fells, Ennerdale country, blue and folded, and completely undeveloped. Evening in summer is remarkable here for a specific reason. The sun sets behind the house over the Irish Sea, so the fells in front of you are lit, while the house itself is already in shadow. The effect lasts about half an hour and makes the hills look considerably closer than they are. Cleator Moor grew fast during the iron ore boom of the 19th century. West Cumberland hematite was among the best in the world. The pits and works multiplied, and the town filled up so quickly and with so much Irish labour that it picked up the nickname Little Ireland. Then the ore ran out, the works closed one after another through the 20th century, and the town kept its street plan and its chapels, while losing the entire reason it had been built at that size. That is the short version of why a 4-bedroom detached house here costs roughly what a used car costs in the south of England, and it is also why the place has a kind of stubborn dignity that newer towns lack. Whitehaven is 15 minutes by road, Carlisle around an hour, and Ennerdale Water is close enough to walk to on a long morning if you are willing to earn it. £46,000. House 4, the floating staircase, £53,000. There is a stone staircase in this house that has no support underneath it, none. It curves up out of the hall, each step socketed into the wall at one end and hanging over open air at the other, and it has been doing exactly that since roughly 1790. A surveyor spent 3 paragraphs on it in 2019, described the construction as a cantilevered stone flight, noted that the geometry does the work rather than any beam or post, and concluded that it would in all likelihood outlast the roof. There is no handrail on the open side. Nobody has ever added one, and as far as the town knows, nobody has ever fallen. The house wrapped around that staircase is detached, grey stone, sitting alone at the top of a cobbled lane with fields on 3 sides and no neighbouring wall touching it at any point. This is Alston in the North Pennines, often described as the highest market town in England. The town wears that altitude honestly, with steep cobbles that punish soft shoes, walls built thick enough to argue with anything the weather sends, and a general sense of having settled the question of comfort versus survival a very long time ago in favour of survival. 3 bedrooms, 1 small bathroom, a kitchen with a flagged floor that stays cold in August, and is a genuine relief in the 2 weeks a year when heat becomes an issue. The living room has a cast iron range still in place, blacked and unused but connected, and a window seat built into the thickness of the wall. Behind the house, a long thin garden runs uphill, terraced roughly, with a stone privy at the far end now used as a tool shed and a gooseberry bush that fruits heavily and is ignored by everyone. There is no garage, only a hard standing beside the gate, which in winter means clearing snow off a car by hand. The 2 front bedrooms look southeast across the South Tyne Valley to the Pennine Ridge, with Cross Fell in view whenever the cloud lifts high enough to allow it. Early morning is the moment worth waking up for, particularly in late autumn, when frost fills the valley bottom as a solid white layer, and the ridge above it is already catching sun. There is a local wind here with its own name, the Helm wind, which rolls off the Cross Fell escarpment and can be heard before it arrives. Newcastle is about 90 minutes on the main road east, Carlisle a similar run northwest, and both are day trips rather than commutes. The village shop, the pub, and the narrow gauge railway are all within walking distance of the front gate. £53,000, staircase included. House 5, £50,000, £50,000. That is the number. Not a guide price, not an auction estimate, not an opening figure somebody expects you to bid over and then argue about for 6 weeks. £50,000 freehold for a detached house standing on its own ground at one of the highest points in Wales, on the northern edge of Brynmawr, at the exact line where the streets stop and the open moor of the Brecon Beacons begins. Now the house. Rendered stone, painted cream, 2 stories, with a small extension at the back added in the 1980s that does not pretend to be anything other than what it is. 3 bedrooms, all genuinely usable, and a bathroom refitted cheaply but recently, which is often the better combination at this end of the market. The living room runs front to back with a hatch through to the kitchen that somebody cut in and everybody since has been grateful for. The garden is around 500 square feet, sloping, with a concrete path down the middle, a coal bunker still in place at the side, and a gate at the bottom that opens directly onto a footpath climbing to the ridge. There is a garage, detached from the house, big enough for 1 car and a workbench, with a window in the back wall. The view is the reason the price reads as a surprise, rather than a warning. From the back bedroom and the top of the garden you look north across the head of the valley to the eastern beacons, a long, unbroken horizon with no buildings on it at all. Winter afternoons are the best of it, when the sun sits low and the frost line on the moor is visible as a clean horizontal edge partway up the slope, everything above it white and everything below it brown. In summer, the same view goes soft and green and slightly disappointing, which is a thing nobody selling houses ever admits. Brynmawr also holds one genuinely extraordinary piece of history. Its rubber factory, built after the war with a row of enormous shallow concrete domes, was intended to bring work to a town that had suffered appalling unemployment between the wars. Architecturally, it became famous, and in 1986, it was the first post-war building in Britain to be given listed status. It was demolished anyway in 2001, after years of argument, but for 15 years, this small town at the top of the valleys held the most celebrated piece of modern industrial architecture in the country. And older residents will still tell you where it stood. Newport is around 40 minutes down the valley, Cardiff not much more than an hour. And there are buses from the town centre a few minutes' walk away. £50,000. Still true at the end of the paragraph. House 6, Kinlochleven, Highlands, Scotland, £58,000. Kinlochleven sits at the head of a sea loch with mountains rising on 3 sides, and this detached house stands near the western edge of the village with its own garden wall and a burn running along the boundary that is audible from inside with the windows open. 2 bedrooms plus a box room, a kitchen with room for a table under the window, and a wood burner in the living room that the last owner clearly relied on rather than treated as decoration. There is a stack of seasoned birch in the shed and a maul leaning against it, which tells you most of what you need to know about heating here. The garden is generous for the money, close to 800 square feet, part lawn and part gravel, with a timber shed and a drying line strung between 2 posts that has been replaced often enough that the knots are professional. Windows are plastic frame throughout, fitted about a decade ago, and the roof was checked and partially re-slated in the same period. The house sits low and solid, which it needs to, because the glen funnels wind straight down onto it. The mountain view is the Memores, and it is close rather than distant, which changes the whole character of it. From the living room and the front garden, the slopes rise almost vertically out of the village, so the view is less a panorama than a wall of ground standing over you. Light on those slopes changes constantly because cloud gets trapped in the glen and cannot easily escape. The best time is a clear evening in June, when the sun stays on the tops until nearly 11 at night. The water in the loch goes completely flat, and the reflection doubles everything. The history here is genuinely unusual. Kinlochleven exists because of aluminium. A smelter was built at the head of the loch in the early years of the 20th century, powered by the Blackwater Dam and reservoir on the moor above, and that dam was constructed largely by hand by navvies, who lived in temporary huts in conditions that were notorious even at the time. Men died in winter on the walkout. Because the village had its own hydroelectricity from the moment it was built, it is frequently described as the first place in the world where every house had electric light, and it was known for years as the Electric Village. The smelter closed. The dam, the pipelines on the hillside, and the reputation are all still there. Fort William is under half an hour by road, Glasgow around 2.5 hours, and the West Highland Way passes directly through the village, which means a steady summer trade of walkers and a very quiet winter. £58,000. House 7, Glossop, Peak District, England. £59,000, a detached stone house on the eastern side of Glossop, standing in its own plot with a low wall and a beech hedge, no shared walls, no shared drive, no negotiation with anyone about a fence, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom upstairs and a second toilet downstairs, and a kitchen that runs the full width of the back of the house with a window over the sink and a door out to the garden. The stone is millstone grit, dark and heavy, and it has taken on the sooted quality that older buildings in this part of the Pennines wear, whether they were cleaned in the 1980s or not. The garden is around 700 square feet, terraced into 2 levels, with stone steps between them and a retaining wall that bulges slightly at one end but has held for decades. At the bottom, there is a stone outbuilding that a previous owner wired for power and used as a workshop, with a bench along one side and shelving made from old floorboards. There is parking for 2 cars on a gravel apron at the front, and a gate wide enough for a trailer. The view is Bleaklow, the great flat-topped mass of dark peat moorland that sits above the town, and you get it from both back bedrooms and from the upper terrace of the garden. It is at its most impressive in the hour before a storm, when the moor goes almost black, the edge of it appears to move nearer, and the light drops so fast that you turn lamps on at 4 in the afternoon. Winter brings snow that sits on the tops for weeks, while the town below stays merely wet. Glossop's history reaches much further back than its mills. At Gamesley, on the edge of the town, stand the remains of a Roman fort known locally as Machynlleth Castle, built to hold the routes across the Pennines and garrisoned by auxiliary troops a very long way from anywhere they would have called home. You can walk to the earthworks from this house in about half an hour, stand on the corner of a rampart laid out nearly 2,000 years ago, and look at precisely the same moorland skyline that Garrison looked at every day. Very little in between has changed the shape of that horizon. Manchester is genuinely commutable from here, around 40 minutes by train from the town station, and Sheffield is reachable over the pass on a day when the pass is open. That combination of real city access and moorland at the end of the street is the thing this house has that most cheap houses do not. £59,000 within reach of a major city. House 8, Newtonmore, Cairngorms, Scotland, £62,000. This is a detached house on the quieter side of Newtonmore, hulled in pale grey, with its own driveway and open ground behind it, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom that has seen better decades but works, a good-sized living room with a bay window and a back porch that is cold in every month of the year and extremely useful for boots, waterproofs and wet dogs. The kitchen was fitted in the 1990s in oak effect and has the deep sort of ceramic sink that people now pay a great deal to reinstall. The garden runs to roughly 900 square feet, most of it grass, bounded by a post and wire fence rather than a wall, so the view is not interrupted by anything at ground level. There is a prefabricated garage that leans very slightly and has leaned very slightly for years, plus a rotary drying line and a stone slab by the back door that somebody clearly used for cleaning fish. The mountains here arrive from 2 directions, which is unusual and makes the house feel more open than its size suggests. From the back you look north to the Machynlleth, rounded, pale and grassy, older-looking country than the granite to the south. From the front bedroom you get the northern edge of the Cairngorms proper, sharper and higher, holding snow well into spring. The best hour is early morning in late winter, when the snow line is high and clean and the air is so still that you can hear the river running through the village. Newtonmore's real claim to fame is sport. It is widely regarded as the home of shinty, the Highland stick game that predates most codified sports in Britain by centuries, played fast and hard with a curved stick and very little padding, and the village club holds one of the most decorated records in the game. Match days genuinely empty the surrounding streets. A short distance away is the Highland Folk Museum, an open-air museum with reconstructed turf houses and a working township, which shows in uncomfortable detail how people in this glen lived before houses like this one were built. Inverness is around 50 minutes north on the main road, Perth a little over an hour south, and the village has its own station on the Highland Main Line, which makes this one of the better-connected cheap houses in Scotland. £62,000. House 9, Tredegar, Brecon Beacons, Foothills, Wales, £61,000. A detached house at the top of Tredegar, stone built and rendered at the front only, standing alone at the end of a short lane with fields rising behind it. 3 bedrooms, plus a small 4th room over the stairs that fits a desk and a chair, and nothing else anybody would want. The kitchen was replaced about 8 years ago in a plain modern style that will date but has not yet, and the bathroom still has a full-sized bath, which matters more than people admit in a cold climate. The garden is enclosed, around 600 square feet, with a paved sitting area at the back that catches sun until late evening and a strip of border where somebody grew runner beans up canes for years. There is an attached stone store, not quite a garage, that would comfortably take a motorbike, a freezer, and a stack of firewood. The lane is unadopted, which means potholes are a community matter, and everybody on it has an opinion about that. The mountain view is north and west, across the head of the valley toward Tredegar and the southern edge of the Beacons. From the back bedroom, the horizon is entirely unbuilt. An unbroken line of upland with the limestone quarries above Tredegar visible as pale scars. It is best on a clear, cold morning when those quarry faces catch the first light and turn almost white against the brown moor, and worst in a wet November when the cloud comes down to roof level and the view is a rumour. The history of this town changed the whole country. Aneurin Bevan was born in Tredegar in 1897, one of many children in a mining family, and the Tredegar Medical Aid Society, funded by small weekly contributions from workers and providing doctors, medicine and treatment to the whole community, became the working model he pointed to when he built the National Health Service after the war. His line about wanting to Tredegarize the country was not a joke. Standing in this garden, you are looking down at the streets where that idea was tested in practice for decades before it went national, which is a considerable thing to get for £61,000. Cardiff is a little over an hour by road, Newport around 50 minutes, and there are regular buses down the valley to the rail network. £61,000, House 10, Millom, Cumbria, England. £65,000, Millom sits on a peninsula at the southwestern corner of the Lake District, a town that most visitors to the national park never see because it is not on the way to anything. This detached house stands on the northern edge of it, with a hedge on two sides and a stone wall on the third. 3 bedrooms, one with a fitted cupboard running the whole length of the room, and a bathroom tiled in the 1990s that is entirely serviceable and entirely without charm. Downstairs there is a through living room with a fireplace at one end and a kitchen with a pantry, the sort of cold-shelved cupboard on an outside wall that modern houses stopped including and modern owners keep rediscovering. The garden is large for the price, close to 1,000 square feet, laid out as lawn with a path around the edge and a small orchard corner containing 2 damson trees that crop heavily every other year. There is a detached garage with double timber doors that swell in wet weather and need a shoulder. The house is rendered and painted, last done perhaps 6 years ago, and the sea air will make that a recurring job rather than a finished one. The view is Black Combe, the isolated fell that rises straight out of the coastal plain and dominates every window on the north side of the house. You get it from the kitchen, the main bedroom, and most of the garden, and because it stands alone rather than in a range, it reads as a single enormous object rather than as scenery. The best time is a summer evening. The sun goes down over the Irish Sea behind you, and the whole eastern face of the fell holds the last light for about 20 minutes, going from gold to pink to grey while you watch. Millom was an iron town. The Hodbarrow mines just south of here were among the richest deposits of hematite anywhere in the country, worked out under the sea behind a great barrier of a sea wall. And when the operation finally closed in 1968, the town lost its main employer in a single stroke and never replaced it. The poet Norman Nicholson lived in Millom almost his entire life in a house on the main street, and wrote seriously and repeatedly about exactly this landscape, the fell, the slag banks, the estuary, and the sea. That means there is a body of published literature devoted to the view from this bedroom window, which is not something you can say about most houses at any price. Barrow-in-Furness is around 40 minutes, Lancaster about an hour and a half, and the town has a station on the Cumbrian coastline, a slow and beautiful route that hugs the water. £65,000, House 11, Machynlleth, southern Eryri, Wales, £68,000, a detached house on a lane above Machynlleth, slate-roofed, with its own gate and a gravel turning area at the front. 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, which at this price is close to extravagant, and a living room with an open fireplace and a slate hearth cut in a single piece. There is a conservatory at the back, added cheaply, freezing in January, and unusable at midday in July, but perfect for about 5 months of the year. The kitchen has a quarry-tiled floor and a door that opens onto stone steps down to the garden. The garden runs to roughly 800 square feet, sloping away from the house, and includes 4 established apple trees of a variety nobody local can agree on. At the top, there is a stone outbuilding with power and a window that would make an obvious studio or workshop, with room for a desk and a stove. The lane is quiet, used mainly by the 2 houses beyond this one, and by walkers heading up onto the hill. The view is south and east across the Dyfi Valley toward the hills at the southern edge of Eryri and the beginning of the Cambrian Mountains, ridge behind ridge, each one paler than the last. From the conservatory, you get the entire sweep in one go. Late morning is the moment in this house when mist burns off the river and the ridges separate out one by one, which takes perhaps 15 minutes and is different every time. Machynlleth was, for a short and remarkable period, the seat of Welsh government. Owain Glyndwr held a parliament here in 1404 during his rising against English rule, summoning representatives from across Wales, and the town has never once stopped mentioning it, with a building on the main street devoted to the story. 6 centuries later, the town also became a long-standing centre for alternative technology and renewable energy experiment, which gives it an unusual double character: medieval national history in one direction and stubborn practical futurism in the other. Very few small towns manage either, let alone both. Aberystwyth is around half an hour by road, Shrewsbury about 90 minutes, and there is a station in the town on the Cambrian line with a market that has run on the same day of the week for centuries. £68,000. House 12, Wanlockhead, Lowther Hills, Scotland. £72,000. Wanlockhead is the highest village in Scotland, and this detached house sits near the upper end of it, whitewashed, thick-walled, standing entirely on its own, with hills closing in behind. 2 bedrooms and a large attic room reached by a fixed ladder stair, which the last owner slept in specifically because of the skylight. The kitchen is small and practical, the living room is not small at all, and there is a wood burner with a stone surround that does most of the heating work for the whole house. The plumbing has been lagged with obvious care, which is what altitude does to people. Outside there is around 700 square feet of enclosed ground, mostly gravel and hardy shrubs, because grass struggles up here and mowing is a losing battle for 8 months of the year. A stone shed holds tools and a snow shovel that shows real use. There is parking for 2 cars beside the gate, and the road up to the village is one of the highest public roads in Scotland, which is exciting in October and a genuine consideration in January. The view is hills in every direction, the rounded green summits of the Lowther Range, treeless and smooth, with old mine workings visible as terraces and spoil on the nearer slopes. From the attic skylight, you look straight up the glen. The best time here is not daytime at all. It is a clear night because there is almost no light pollution, and the sky over these hills is properly dark. Dark enough that the Milky Way is an obvious feature rather than something you have to look for. The history is better than the house, and the house is fine. Wanlockhead was a lead mining village, worked for centuries, with silver and even gold recovered from the same ground. In 1756, the miners here founded a subscription library, pooling their wages to buy books collectively, so that men who spent their days underground could read in the evening. It is one of the oldest libraries of its kind in Europe, and the building and much of the original collection survive. A village of a few hundred people, higher than anywhere else in Scotland, with brutal work and short lives, decided that what it needed most was a library. Dumfries is around an hour by road, Glasgow about 90 minutes, and the nearest railway station is a half-hour drive down the valley. £72,000, House 13, Bethesda, Eryri, Wales. £74,000. The last house is a detached slate-built property on the edge of Bethesda, standing alone above the road with its own walled forecourt and a long garden behind. 4 bedrooms, though the 4th is under the eaves and reached through the 3rd, an arrangement that works for children and for nobody else. There is a bathroom upstairs and a shower room downstairs and a kitchen with a slate windowsill cut from local rock and worn into a shallow curve at the sink end by 100 years of elbows and wet plates. The walls are built of the same stone that made the town rich and then broke it, and they are not going anywhere. The garden is close to 1,100 square feet, terraced across 3 levels, held by dry stone retaining walls, built without mortar, and still true. There is a greenhouse on the middle level with 4 cracked panes and a stone outbuilding at the top that housed a pig within living memory and now houses a lawnmower and a broken chair. Parking is on the forecourt, sheltered by the wall, which matters because the wind comes down this valley with real intent. The view is the Cairngorms, and it is the best on this list. From the 2 rear bedrooms and every level of the garden, you look across the Ogwen Valley to Eryri far and the long grey wall of the Cairngorms Ridge, high, broad, and almost entirely empty, home to a population of wild ponies that have been there longer than anyone can properly date. The best hour is sunset in early autumn, when light comes straight down the valley from the west, and the quarry terraces on the far side turn the colour of wet ash before the whole face goes blue. Bethesda exists because of Penryn Quarry, once the largest slate quarry in the world, and it carries one of the heaviest stories in British industrial history. Between 1900 and 1903, the quarrymen were locked in a dispute with the quarry owner that lasted almost 3 years. The longest industrial dispute this country has ever seen. Families went hungry, some men returned to work and put cards in their windows saying so, and were not forgiven for a generation. Chapels split. The town still remembers which houses stood on which side. This house was built in that period from that stone by people who were part of that argument, and the quarry is still working today. Bangor is 15 minutes down the valley, with a station, a university and a hospital, and the mountains start at the end of the garden, £74,000. 13 detached houses, from a granite cottage in Tomintoul at £30,000 to a slate-built 4-bedroom above Bethesda at £74,000. Every one of them standing on its own 4 walls, with a mountain in the window, a real story behind it, and nobody buying. So tell me in the comments which one you would take, and be honest about whether you could actually live with the winters.